TCI is brought to you by TaylorMade Stallion Unbridled Song, producing top songs year after year, including 13 Grade 1 winners. Visit unbridledsong.com.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Triple Crown. I'm John Siegel alongside Joel Cunningham. We are 1 week away from Kentucky Derby 138, and we've been saying for a while now that we think this is one of the best groups of three-year-olds we've seen in a long time. But hey, we didn't want you just to hear it from us, so we gathered a panel of experts together. We met at Keeneland in their director's room, and Joel, we tackled some hot topics about Kentucky Derby 138.
Yeah, and our experts were Ray Paulick and obviously our Brisnet handicapper, Ed DeRosa. John, two guys that have covered a lot of derbies, have a lot of knowledge base on the Kentucky Derby, trends and tendencies, and also have a very sharp pulse on racing. So we had a lot of fun at Keeneland. In the first segment, we tackled some important topics for this year's Derby, John. I mean, we talked about the quality of the group, and we talk about things like the addition of the also eligibles, the Apollo curse, which is very relevant with Bodemeister, and we also talked about how this year's Kentucky Derby will be bet.
All right, on Monday's show, we said we were going to compile a panel of experts. Well, this was the best we could do. We have Ray Paulick and Ed DeRosa. Ray, I know you've been to more derbies than all of us combined. I know you missed the first couple. But we are going to now today call you the historian. You okay with that role?
Yeah, that's fine. Just call me the old guy, whatever. That's
all right. And Ed, you obviously hit all squared away, according to Twitter anyway. You hit all squared away in the Lexington. So we're going to call you the handicapper today.
Right. Twitter is true, so I'll take it.
Well, then we're going to lunch afterwards because I know how much money you made off the race. I'm not going to say it because I don't want your wife to know.
Appreciate that.
We're going to the steakhouse afterwards.
All right.
All right, guys, let's talk about Kentucky Derby 138. This is an exciting group of three-year-olds. Ray, can you remember a better group of three-year-olds as they stand right now?
Well, my memory's not as good as it used to be, but I will say this. 9 horses came out of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile last November and have come back to win graded or group races. That's as deep a field as I can recall as far as good 2-year-olds transitioning to 3-year-olds. So you know, using the key race theory of looking at what horses have done since they ran in a certain race, that Breeders' Cup Juvenile was a phenomenal race, and I think we're really in store for a quality race with, I don't know, 8 to 10 legitimate contenders.
And that kind of brings me to a question I really have for Ed, being the Brisnet guy, being the speed rating guy. Speak to the quality of this group and how fast they are in general, because to me they look like a fast group, but I've read other opinions elsewhere on the matter.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's relative. We were talking before we came on about how Mind That Bird sort of bucked a trend and not having a triple-digit BRIS rating and still winning. But to me, that's a relative figure in a slower year, and we saw what was behind him, didn't really go on and do much. Right. But this year, that's certainly not in play. If you haven't run 100 by now, I would definitely say you're behind the 8 ball. And there are some fast horses in here. El Padrino has the fastest BRIS rating of the year, and he's sort of under the radar after the 4th in the Florida Derby, but he's certainly proven he can be fast. And then I look at horses like Hanson, Union Rags, Take Charge Indy. This is a fast group.
Well, let's move now to some hot topics. I mean, one of the hot topics we're going to hear all week. This is the first year that the Kentucky Derby is doing also eligible list. Ray, can you tell me about that? What do you think that does to this Derby field?
To me, the also eligible list is going to be the horses that have the least chance. So I'm not going to play it as much of a factor this year.
Well, there are some horses down that are legitimate contenders, including my Adonis. Kelly Breen said they're looking at this race, and I think he could be a factor.
Well, I just think there's so much quality from last year's 2-year-old crop. I mean, I'm a Union Rags fan. I think he looks like sort of an old-fashioned horse that had good 2-year-old form. He's carried it into his 3-year-old season. He's got an outstanding pedigree. I just think these horses that ran at 2 are going to be tough to beat.
All right, one more hot topic before we let you guys go. It's the Apollo curse. Ray, we have Bodemeister who's going to try to break that curse this year.
Yeah, in 1882, Apollo won without having raced as a 2-year-old. No horse has won the Kentucky Derby since then without racing as a 2-year-old. Bodemeister didn't start until this year, so he's trying to break that streak. Going back to Apollo, though, and I didn't go to that Derby, by the way. That was a little before my time.
Your dad told you about it?
Yes, he did.
Oh, nice.
But as a 3-year-old, he ran 21 times, and as a 4-year-old, he ran 30 times. So it's not like he was this sore horse that didn't, that couldn't stand training. I'm not sure why he didn't start till 3, but I think there's a reason for this pattern to be alive today, and that is that the Derby is such a unique race. I think experience is important. 2-year-old experience helps. I don't think it's necessary. We'll see if Bodemeister could do it. Curlin didn't race as a 2-year-old, I don't think, and he did okay in the Triple Crown and later on in the Breeders' Cup, but he didn't win the Derby. So experience is an important factor when you're looking at going 1.25 miles, big crowd on hand, 20 horses usually in the starting gate. It's hard for a horse to do that on his 3rd or 4th career start.
But, you know, when you talk about a horse like Bodemeister, it's relevant because he's probably going to be your favorite in the race. I mean, would you agree, Ed? I mean, do you think he's going to be the favorite? And if not, who's going to be the favorite, and what's the price going to be on the favorite?
I think it's absolutely going to be him or Union Rags. I think if Union Rags works lights out as he did before the Florida Derby, and there's even more chatter about that, and then the Michael Matz factor with the press, I think will weigh in on him taking some money. But it'll definitely be one of those two, and I would expect them to be 5 or 6 to 1, depending on other defections. But as we talked about, this is a deep field, and if it's the same depth and we don't lose a lot of the top horses, then I would expect co-favorites at around 6 to 1.
Who's going to be the 3rd, 4th choice, and how many horses will be under 10 to 1 in your opinion?
I think after the top 2 we talked about, then the next tier is probably Gemologist. I would expect Creative Cause to take some money. I think if Dullahan works well on the dirt, Dale Romans is the type of guy that I think will take money. And then you have the other factors like Calvin Burrell and Rosie riding horses. That could weigh on the odds. I don't think we'll see less than 10 to 1 on Mark Valesky or Take Charge Indy, but they're certainly in that top tier of horses who will take money.
Joel, we need to thank G.D. Hieronymus and his team out at Keeneland for allowing us to use a director's room. It was really a beautiful setting for our 2-part series. We'll be back Monday to tackle more hot topics.
And we have some key ones to talk about, John. I mean, segment 2, we're going to talk about 2 of my favorite, which is the pace scenario and the post position draw.
Right.
2 keys to the Kentucky Derby in a year, specifically this year, John. I mean, if you draw bad on Wednesday, you're all but out of this race. We'll talk about the effect of the draw and the Triniberg factor, the pace scenario. How will it affect Hansen and Bodemeister, and how will it affect the general pace? I mean, will it be a fast pace, a moderate pace in our eyes? We dig into it.
All right, let's dig in right now to the Derby trial, Joel. It's this Saturday. This is, in theory, a Derby prep. Do you see any of these horses that win this race going on to the Kentucky Derby?
Yeah, and in theory, it's the last Derby prep, and this used to be a big-time Kentucky Derby prep, you know, decades ago. Not the case anymore. I mean, it is a grade 3 for $200,000. John, you get a field of 11 in here, but it's a pretty unaccomplished group. I mean, Motor City's a graded winner. You know, here at Churchill, if he were to come back and run big, maybe they would consider wheeling him back in a week's rest. But really, I don't think that this is going to be a Derby prep this year.
All right, who do you like in this race?
You know, I like Painter a lot. I mean, obviously, he's a horse we've been on, you know, all spring long for Bob Baffert. What's interesting to me is I think it's all between Painter and Bourbon Courage. I mean, Bourbon Courage is a very talented sprinter coming from Fairgrounds. I think he's going to flash outside speed in here. He could be tough to run down. But to me, he's a sprinter facing, you know, a true route horse like Painter at a middle distance. I like Painter's quality. I think he runs by him in the stretch.
All right, if Painter wins, does he go in the Derby?
No, Justin Zayat's already said they're gonna resist temptation. They have Bodemeister, and they're probably gonna hold Painter off to the Preakness.
All right, thank you, Joel. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you come back on Monday. As we mentioned, we'll have part 2 of our panel discussion, and we'll also recap the Derby trial.